Hi, everybody. Today is Thursday, April 9th, 2026, and our dear friend, our brother, Pepe Escobar is here with us. Welcome back, Pep.
Always a pleasure to be with you, Nima, and with our audience. Greetings from Buddhist Southeast Asia. It's still early, it's 10 at night. We still have a long night ahead.
Yeah. Pepe, let's start with the ceasefire, 2 week ceasefire, and the negotiations going to happen. I want to know what is your understanding of what has happened so far?
Well, it's extremely complicated because the situation was unraveling the minute after the ceasefire was announced. In fact, the ceasefire was blown up in the first 10 hours. And practically everyone across the spectrum was convinced that it was dead. But then, from yesterday to today, it resuscitated somehow. Very, very important. Once again, the role of a go between. In my latest column, I was talking in some detail about the role of Pakistan, not as mediators or the architects of the ceasefire, but as the messengers, the go betweens. So they were passing messages back and forth. And this apparently has led to enormous misunderstandings. The number one is the version in English that the Americans got of the Iranian 10-point plan. Apparently, the original version in Farsi is quite different from the version in English that the Americans received. But assuming these people in the White House can read, that's not a guarantee. We know that the baboon of Barbaria doesn't read anything, but he has minions who read for him. They could have gone to X, and it was published on X for days, the Iranian 10-pointer in English. Very, very simple. And this was exactly the first version translated into English and available on X for everybody to read. So the accusation that Pakistan may have interfered and passed a wrong or a badly translated version to the US does not hold. We know that the White House lies all the time. And on top of that, they start lying immediately after we had a ceasefire, apparently. They start lying about Lebanon. Prime Minister Sharif published once again on X in English a post where it's written that Lebanon is included. Everybody can check that on X. So the Americans immediately afterwards start saying, no, Lebanon is not included. And the stupid blonde spokesperson for the White House said, no, it's not included. And on top of it, she said, no, and the 10-pointer, it's absolutely ridiculous, etc. We threw it into the garbage. Well, so this was the White House destroying already something that they had theoretically agreed upon before. Well, it's typical White House, right? So once again, Pakistan as mediators. Between yesterday and today, the Pakistanis once again, they promised Tehran that, look, the Americans told us that they're going to refrain the genocidal war criminal in Tel Aviv. After, of course, he had gone on an absolutely demented rampage all across Lebanon, killing people all over, not only in Beirut, but all over the place. Something absolutely horrible, Gaza style. And Iran was ready to respond really highway to hell. So it was thanks to the Pakistanis once again that they, okay, we trust you, at least maybe probably for the last time. And okay, we're going to send our delegation to Islamabad. They will be arriving probably tonight in Islamabad. I know where they're staying. I stayed there, Nima, the Serena Hotel in Islamabad. It's a wonderful hotel, which, by the way, was completely, they expelled everybody. It's a fortress because both delegations are going to be there. But Vance is going to be at the American Embassy in Islamabad with the war set up around the embassy. Typical. Well, the substance of all that. On the Iranian side, we're going to have Arakshi and Ghalibaf. That's predictable. They have been leading these negotiations, the back and forth, including the subterranean ones. And on the American side, we're going to have J.D. Vance, J. Palantir Vance. All right, I was discussing this with you, Nima, before we were on air. Thinking clearly about his legacy and building his future as a presidential candidate, of course, and he would love to pose as the statesman who brought peace, whatever we can define it, between the US and Iran. But we also have Dumb and Dumber on the table, Witkoff and Kushner, which, it's absolutely impossible on the top of our heads to come up with a metaphor to explain the Taoist patience of the Iranians to once again sit on the table with these two idiots who bring nothing to the table whatsoever: expertise, diplomatic skills, reasoning, etc. But it's the official White House designated delegation. So this real negotiation will be between Vance and Arakshi Ghalibaf. There's no question about that. What can they possibly achieve if we compare the Iranian 10 points and the American 15 points? And both sides are totally aware, point by point, of the opposite side. And it, as we all know, and all of you, our audience, knows, everything is absolutely incompatible. So how to bridge this gap? Okay, it could last a weekend, maybe it could go on after a few days, but in a matter of a few days, it would be practically impossible. Is Iran negotiating under a position of force? I would like to ask you, Nima, after I finish here, how do you see it? I would say that for the moment the landscape is quite muddy and fuzzy. They didn't need a ceasefire now. Iran has the initiative on every front, and especially on the most important front, the Strait of Hormuz, the real game changer. So they don't need a ceasefire. And they were starting to ramp up, I would say, the next stage of the decentralized mosaic strategy, using their latest missiles, considering that Israel has run out of interceptors practically, so they can bomb Israel any way they want from now on. So why does the Empire of Chaos and the Absent Syndicate need ceasefire? To redeploy. It's an operational pause. So we have to see this from the operational point of view, the military operational point of view, much more than the geopolitical point of view. What they can do in 2 weeks? Not much, but something that is already ongoing. They can pre-position all the assets that they have, including 50,000 troops, to try once again a mini ground invasion somewhere in the Persian Gulf, Kashim Island, whatever that is, or Karg, which is still far away, but there's this American obsession that if they take Karg, they cut off Iranian oil exports. So the whole situation for the moment, ceasefire-wise, favors this American redeployment and pause. The Iranians are, as you know, Nima, they are perfectly aware of that. And they, when they say they have their finger on the trigger, yes, they know that this thing can restart anytime, and they are ready. And all, of course, they are also redeploying their forces and reorganizing the decentralized mosaic. But then there's something that I could not confirm, but it's a very, very worrying development if this is true. And it's absolutely impossible to confirm this with the Chinese. And obviously, military sources in Iran, they will not volunteer this information. Apparently, there were three cargoes from China that landed in Tehran between yesterday and today. Three huge cargo planes, probably bringing hardcore military material to Iran. And there is a possibility that Iran was running out of essential munitions, and the Chinese are helping. We don't know. There's no way we can confirm that. But this would explain why China, at the last minute, influenced Iran to take the ceasefire. Because until the literally the last minute, Iran was inclined not to take the ceasefire. Okay, what are we going to get out of it? And after all that absolutely crazy Muslim world WhatsApp phone call dementia lasting hours or more than a day, the Chinese at the last minute told Iran, okay, take it. There are lots of actors, intercontinental, in fact, that will appreciate the fact that you are negotiating. So in terms of increasing your political capital is a good thing. We have your back. That's the Chinese talking to Iran, the way we interpret it. But we don't know necessarily how deep China has Iran's back. And considering that these decisions, Nima, in Beijing, they're very opaque. It's, you never know how they take these decisions. And especially for us foreigners, it's off limits. It's impossible for us to know. So considering our contacts or, analysts that we talk to, we can have an idea. But there are many elements that favor China telling Iran, sit down and talk, while the Chinese are also coordinating with Iran militarily. At the same time, when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, until 1 or 2 days ago, the strait now is closed again and open only for a few ships a day. The Chinese ships had no problem. And very important for China, this toll booth is being operated in yuan and payment through CIPS, the Chinese international paying system, this is the beginning of the petro yuan, in place. So this, from a Chinese point of view, this is swimming, and it's not going to change. For instance, what is going to change is if major countries accept officially that the Strait of Hormuz from now on is managed by Iran, they submit to the rules. So there's going to be a stampede of nations all over the world following it. And guess who's on the front line? South Korea. They sent a special emissary to Iran, probably going to discuss the passage of tankers going to South Korea. And of course, they will abide by the new rules. So if South Korea officially abides by the new rules, that's it. That's it. Everybody else will follow. So Iran is playing with that as well. And because they know that a closed Strait of Hormuz or nearly closed, Asia is bleeding, literally. So the number two victims they're not the US, they are Europe and Asia. And obviously, Asian nations are mobilizing them, especially South Korea, much more than Japan. Japan is an extremely complicated case, and it's an American vassal. South Korea has more leeway. So this is where we are at the moment. This the way this whole thing is interconnected, which is extremely complex, and Iran has to juggle with all these variables. And at the same time, because Iran now has a different stature globally, now it's starting to be seen as, I wouldn't say a big power, but an emerging big power on a global stage. They have to manage this new political capital, right? So it is a very uncomfortable situation to sit down with these genocidals on the same table on a ceasefire that mostly benefits the US. So we're going to see, let's say, we're going to see the tenor and the tone of the first day of the negotiations, where this is going, or if it's collapsing immediately. Yeah, every scenario is possible. But what I think for most of us, the most important element in the big picture is how complex is the chessboard that Iran has to navigate, and they cannot make a single mistake.
Yeah.
That's how difficult it is, right? Okay, Nima, now I'm asking you practically the same question. How do you see the pros and cons of Iran sitting on the same table in Islamabad, convinced by the Pakistanis that there's going to be some sort of meaningful dialogue with the Americans? And of course, there won't be interference by the death cult.
Yeah. I think those three cargoes that you've mentioned are basically related to the defensive part of the military operation in Iran, the defensive capabilities of Iran. Because in
Yes.
terms of the offensive, they don't have any shortage. But it seems that, through some sort of negotiations behind the scene, Chinese government convinced Iran that they can improve in this short period of time. If the talks fail, they can improve their capabilities in terms of their defensive, the electronic warfare, some sort of improvement in the air defense system of Iran. I think that was the whole agenda. Let's try to negotiate with the United States. Let's give it a 2 weeks of some sort of ceasefire, and let's see what would happen. And on the other hand, Iran had this communication with the government in Pakistan. It's not something new, Pepe. What has agreed on so far a 10-point plan? It was, if I'm not mistaken, 4 days ago, Iran presented those 10 points. It was reiterated. It wasn't just 4 days ago. They have been talking about these 10 points, way before it, 4 days ago. But what is happening is the drastic change on the part of the Trump administration as well. After that failure with the raid on Iranian soil in the southern part of Isfahan, because that gave them some sort of understanding about what would be a ground invasion of Iran, what would be the reaction from the Iran, what are the capabilities of the Iranian army in that sense on the ground. I think there are many factors to be considered. The way that China was somehow promising Iran to improve the defensive capabilities of Iran, the way that Iran saw that this short period of time may improve the whole conflict, the capabilities of Iran to go with a war for such a long time. On the other hand, you see Donald Trump somehow failing in the latest attack on Iran. It was a raid. They wanted to do something underground. It was hugely failed. We're going to learn more in the near future, I hope so, about the casualties of that operation, because we haven't heard anything about the casualties. It's all about one pilot being, rescued from Iran. It's a total lie. It's a total lie. Nobody would believe that. This is the calculation on the part of Iranians. We know that the first point in this 10-point plan was that the war will end on all fronts. They're not going to talking about just Iran and the United States. That's why this Lebanese factor coming to the equation right now, because without Lebanon, there is no ceasefire after all.
Absolutely. Okay, I have another question for you. Do you see a split at the highest level of the government in Tehran, especially inside the Supreme National Council. Correct me if I'm wrong. There are 13 members in the Supreme National Council, right? Galibaf is one of them. It's very, very important. But there are some Pezeshkian aligned people who are, we can say, the reformist, almost the fifth columnist camp. And they got a boost after Zarif published that ghastly opinion piece in Foreign Affairs, which was basically a surrender manifesto.
Yeah.
I read it again. I read it a few days ago, and then I think yesterday I read it again, and it still sounds like a surrendering manifesto. And obviously, the Americans loved it because it provided them an opening to start manipulating some figures close to the presidency. Do you see a split, or this is just superficial?
No, nothing of a split is happening in the leadership. When we talk about Zarif, Zarif is not part of the leadership. He's on the margins of the reformist part of the Iranian, political communities. And that's why what Jawad Zarif was trying to do, I would argue he's not that much important when it comes to domestic policy, because in the West, you look at the way that they're looking at Jawad Zarif as though he's, the decision maker. That's not the case. That's not the case. He can explain the way that he sees the conflict. He sees the end to the conflict. He sees the end to this war. But that doesn't necessarily influence the decision makers in Iran. You mentioned Pezeshkian and his team. They're not getting closer. They're so much attached. They're so much close to Ghalibaf and the head of the parliament. So much. I would argue they're becoming the same sort of policy right now. That's why I think what is happening in terms of how this attack unified all political parties in Iran. I'm talking about those people who are influential, who are important in the decision-making centers of Iran. Those are totally unified. There is no gap. There is no difference between them. You can talk about the domestic policy. Yeah, they have their differences in terms of domestic policy. But right now, that's not the case. Right now is the foreign policy. How to go against the United States. That's why they're totally unified to go with each and every plan. If they come with some sort of plan, it's going to be a unified plan. It's not going to be some sort of plan on the part of Ghalibaf and his team, or it's going to be different on the part of Pezeshkian. No, they're all the same right now, in my opinion.
So would you say that the decision to accept the ceasefire and to go to Islamabad, was it consensual at the Supreme National Council, or you think there was a lot of friction because before they came up with the definitive conclusion? And listening to the street, right, Nima, because the Iranian street is completely, I would say practically completely against any accommodation with the Americans.
Yeah, exactly. But what is happening, Pepe, there are a lot of discussions happening in Iran. You just imagine the communication between Iran and China, Iran and Russia, Iran and domestic Turkey, I would argue, with Pakistan. There are a lot going on behind the scene that we don't know. We don't know exactly what's going on. But I can confirm that any decision that is happening in terms of this 2-week ceasefire was decided at the highest level of Iranian government. I'm talking about the leadership. I'm talking about everything. Everybody's
talking about Mushtaba.
Exactly. They know what they're doing. Without the confirmation of the supreme leader of Iran, they're not capable of doing anything. And many people should understand it, because when we talk about this, and many people, because there is no comprehensive understanding of Iranian government in the West. They don't know how it works.
how it
even
works.
Trump administration doesn't have any clue about what's going on in Iran. That's why they're miscalculating. They're mostly dependent on Israel and Mossad. They're not there to inform them. They're there to deceive them, to force them, to buy them into a new war. That's why they're failing, in my opinion, with the negotiation, with the war, with everything considering Iran.
Mhm.
And but after all, the leadership of Iran, the whole leadership, and supreme leader, together with the people below him, they're all, when they go after such a decision of ceasefire and negotiation with the United States, they consider all of that, and it could be a unified decision on their part.
Do you think this has been well explained to Iranian public opinion, especially these past 2 days? Why are we going to Islamabad? From what you gathered in the Twitter sphere in Iran, where it's exploding against the decision, of course, or Iranian media, for instance, Shatiat Madari, Kayhan newspaper. I interviewed him, Nima, 20-something years ago. As you know, he's an old fox. He is essentially against it. For instance, and Kayhan is a very influential newspaper in Iran.
And we have to understand, Pepe, that always the role of the leadership, the supreme leader of Iran, was to be just right in the middle of these movements, to the left and to the right, to make the right decisions. That's why, when you see Shariat Madari, as you've mentioned, the head of Kayhan newspaper, news outlet, he's so important, by the way.
He is.
When it comes to the right, he's so much influential, as Zarif is to the left. They're both influential in Iran when it comes to the left and right. But what is important is, what is the decision on the part of the leadership? The leadership let all these sides talking the way that they're thinking, they're feeling about the conflict, but the leadership has its own decisions, all together with all officials involved in the government and above the government. I think this is the reality of what is happening in Iran. And Pepe,
yes,
do you have any other question?
Maybe later, because I was struck by some things that was it the Iranian ambassador in Pakistan maybe that said that the Iranian delegation is going to Islamabad, even considering public opinion that is not exactly supporting it. Well, he admitted it. So, and they have to, because if you follow the discussions in Iran, even from abroad, it's obvious that the absolute majority of public opinion is against any accommodation. So this obviously had to be considered by the Supreme Security Council, and obviously by the leader himself. So they are. It's a very sophisticated, calculated bet that they can navigate the Americans on the same table. It's going to be very hard to extract some concessions. So maybe the best they're aiming at is stop the bombing. And that's not guaranteed. And that's not guaranteed, huh?
Basically, what Iran is asking for, Pepe, basic, points are the cessation of war on all fronts, just stopping this war is not. I think that could be achieved by these talks. I'm talking about Lebanon. You cannot leave Lebanon alone. They're part of what's going on. That's why the Iranian government, that's why that's the first point, by the way, in the 10-point plan. They're basically, the first point is that. Then they're talking about other Strait of Hormuz, sanctions. I think finally what we're going to get with these negotiations, and Donald Trump is not capable of making any sort of agreement, in my opinion, after all. What they're going to get, they cannot change the reality of what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz. So it's going to stay under the control of Iranian government. They're going to compensate the cost of war and what has happened, the devastation in Iran by what they're going to charge, mostly the GCC countries in the Persian Gulf, charge
Yes.
them because of the war, the devastation of the war. That's going to be, and I don't see Donald Trump being capable of, removing the sanctions on Iran. They're not going to do that. I
He
don't see that
can't
happening.
because it's Congress, and the U.S. Congress will never remove these sanctions. These are eternal. Exactly.
Yeah. This is going to be some sort of ending a conflict or some sort of ceasefire, or we can put it this way, without reaching a major agreement between the two parties. But the reality is that Donald Trump cannot do anything else more than that,
Yes.
because if they get back to the war, that's not going to change the battlefield. I don't see anything happening in his favor, even with the ground invasion of Iran. What are they going to achieve? It's going to
Exactly.
be more casual.
And it's not going to change anything in Hormuz. It's not going to bring a regime change. Exactly. And it's going to be an enormous humiliation because there will be a lot of body bags if they try.
It's gonna be, and the Iranians know how to fight on the ground, Pepe. They're
On the
so
ground,
good.
yeah.
They're so good.
Exactly.
I
Yes.
saw this with my eyes. I don't
You
know
saw
how
it,
capable
exactly.
they are. That's why I don't like this happening, because we don't need these sort of casualties. We don't need this sort of killing happening on the battlefield, on the ground, because that's enough. The air bombing, the recent raid of the U.S. raid on Iran has shown the capabilities of Iran, even
Mhm.
in a location that it was somehow a surprise attack, by the way. But
Yes.
Iran had managed to respond to the United States in a way that even Donald Trump himself can understand. He needs explain the whole operation more than an hour. He has never done such a thing. Just look at the
Yeah.
history of.
Yeah.
He was just explaining each and every detail. You have to understand what is happening, what has happened, that Donald Trump needs to go that far to explain what has happened during the operation. And I think we're going to learn it as time goes by. We're going to learn what was the reality, which is closer to what we understand from the raid, not the
Mhm.
rescue operation.
Mhm.
Pepe, what Donald Trump is trying to do right now is putting pressure again on NATO. And he's asking desperately, as he tried to
Yeah.
negotiate with the ceasefire, asking desperately for, asking NATO countries to send, forces in the Middle East, in the Strait of Hormuz. I don't know how in the world he's feeling that the situation has changed, or Europe would change its mind toward the Strait of Hormuz. Your understanding?
They're scared to death. First of all, they don't have the weapons and the forces for that. Second, they're scared to death. Third, NATO is imploding from within, just like the EU. It's the same thing. By the way, this visit of that absolutely repulsive Dutchman leading NATO, he was asked directly about the extermination of civilization post, and obviously he dodged the question. He didn't answer, and he said, I absolutely support President Trump. So how can you how we should interpret this, and there's no other interpretation, that NATO basically condones and supports genocide. Not only the genocide in Gaza, we already knew that, but this threat of exterminating a whole civilization by the president of the United States. And this idiot, not even, I would say he's not even, he's even worse, he's much worse than that. I cannot say it because it's censored. He basically says, yeah, I agree with it. So this is the official European elite position on genocide of the other, in a Lévi-Strauss sense, anywhere, as long as they are not European. It's extremely worrying because it's a mix of extreme arrogance, absolutely pitiless view of the world, morally bankrupt, spiritually bankrupt, and at the same time, cowardice. Okay, yeah, You don't agree with the Strait of Hormuz? Okay, go over there with your fleet and try to unblock it yourself. Of course not. They're cowards. They'll never do it. And on that, at least Trump is calling their cowardice. They said, look, you have to, you're not happy with it. You have a few days to send a fleet to unblock Hormuz. Is it going to happen? Of course not. Everybody knows it's not going to happen. So they can only posture in their mix of aggressiveness and extreme cowardice. And of course, morally bankrupt to the Milky Way already. It's absolutely disgusting. But it's good to have once in a while these crystal clear photographs, or instant photographs of the psyche of the collective West. And this was another case, you know.
Pepe, the other point that was so much interesting, it was the panic. Since they announced the ceasefire, it was a panic in Israel, in the Persian Gulf, in GCC countries. They were in panic. You saw what has happened. I think the attack on the way that Israel attacked Lebanon is out of panic, is not out of strength.
It is blind rage. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. Absolutely correct. Yeah. And the UAE is it's complicated, Nima. They are at war with Iran side by side with Israel. So Iran will have to deal with the UAE, I would say sooner rather than later, in a very, very hardcore way. And of course, we all knew that they were part of the Zionist axis. We all knew that those promises of investment in the American economy and all that. We all know that Dubai and Abu Dhabi are extensions of the Empire of Chaos and of the Epstein syndicate interests. But now they are at war de facto against Iran. So, they didn't even comment on those meetings in Islamabad or the ceasefire, where we have a lot of Muslim countries involved. We had Turkey, Egypt, etc. The UAE, Saudi Arabia is that. So how to deal with Saudi Arabia? And Saudi Arabia is a full member of BRICS. How are China and Russia going to deal with the UAE right now? And they are at war with a full BRICS member, Iran. So this is going to be one of the, I would say, most complicated issues from now on. And Iran has to find a way to immobilize the UAE, immobilize and marginalize the UAE. This is going to be very difficult, especially because they have a lot of Iranian money over there, right, Nima?
Yeah.
And well, if they really this promise that they're going to confiscate Iranian assets in Dubai, this will be the straw breaking the Emirati camel's back. You're going to confiscate your money? Okay, just wait. What's going to happen to your oil industry?
I think they're gonna, if they continue with this sort of attitude and getting closer to Israel and attacking Iran, they're gonna be disappeared from the scene in the Middle East. I'm not talking about the country. I'm talking about the leadership and the people who join the Omani government. I see they're gonna be much more better position if they join Oman. It being, they're part of Oman.
It's what the Iraqi scholars, I love those Iraqi scholars. This is what they have been saying for a few weeks now. Eventually, the only place for them to go was back to Oman.
Exactly. That's why, we had General Kane, Pepe, in the briefing of Donald Trump, the way that he was mentioning what has happened in Iran. He said something so important, I think, that each and everybody in Iran was hitting at us with rifle, with small guns, and this shows how they have been deceived somehow. They have been by, I don't know, Mossad, by CIA, that they thought that really Iranians would welcome them to invade their countries. This is huge, Pepe.
Of course, but this is Zionist disinformation, which is it's something they excel in. They're masters of disinformation. They're very good at infiltrating. They're very good at cultivating fifth columns, and that's it. And then they are very good on the PR department to sell that to gullible Americans, including gullible American politicians, especially gullible American politicians. It's what they do best. The problem is when they actually infiltrate. For instance, they infiltrated Hezbollah, and they infiltrated, I would say, probably a few sectors of the IRGC. This is very, very worrying, extremely worrying.
You know yeah, I think you're right. And on the other hand, you see the same thing happening in IDF. They have spies, Iranian spies in IDF, and today we've learned another spy was, somehow they found another spy, Iranian spy in these IDF forces. But the problem is, or the difference is, Iran doesn't seek any sort of assassination, or they're mostly basically they want to find something strategically, find something that is important for their operation to go against Israel. But on the part of Israelis, whenever they manage to find someone to spy for them, they want to find the location of the leadership, the location of the people to assassinate them. Nothing beyond that is happening. That's why you see two different attitudes on the part of Iranians and Israelis. They're basically mostly their policy is based on assassinations. On the other hand, you see, even we had the documents coming out of Dimona. You remember that?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, yeah. They look for privileged information. And the Israelis is just, okay, we found this guy, let's kill him. That's it. There's nothing strategic about it. Absolutely, the approaches are completely different.
And that's works perfectly for their propaganda, that they're capable, they're doing this and that, they're assassinating the leadership. Even with the briefing yesterday, Pete Hegseth was mentioning, we have destroyed, many of leadership in Iran, together with equipment, together with their army. This is some sort of propaganda machine for the mainstream media. And Iran doesn't need that, because they don't have the dominance over the mainstream media.
Exactly. Yeah.
Pepe,
another question.
Go ahead.
If you allow me, a very quick one. As you see it, would you say that Iran is not attacking Israel directly as harshly as they could? It's like they are refraining a little bit, and maybe in a later stage they will go for the kill. But for the moment, it's just like compared to the amount of destruction that they wreaked on the American military bases and on many installations across the Persian Gulf. So when you compare to the direct strikes against Israel, I would say there's an element of suspicion. It could be much harder than that.
Yeah, definitely, because they're trying to be measured in the way that they're responding to Israel. They don't want to go 100% on Israel. They don't want to reveal everything. That's why they're talking about, we have surprises. If the escalation continues, we have the surprises coming. They know what they're talking about, but they don't want to use them. They don't want to put them out, because that would reveal everything you have. That's why you strategically thinking, you're not going to do that to yourself, because you disarm yourself before using them. That's what the reality. Because one part of the attack on Dimona, they just attacked Dimona just to show the Israelis, the Americans,
it was a demonstration, right? Yeah.
They can hit the target. They can hit everything in Israel. There are a lot of surprises on the part of the Iranian army if they continue, because they were talking about it. They were honest about it. Everything they said, they meant it. They used it. So I have no doubt that they have a lot in their arsenal to be used against Israel and against an American aggression if the war continues. And this is somehow it seems to me that Donald Trump has perceived that so far. I don't know how deep is that, but let's see.
Yeah. Well, certainly nobody in his mediocre entourage, and himself is because he's fed extremely filtered information every day, Nima. He never knows anything in depth about what's going on in the battlefield, not to mention the political chessboard. He has no idea. And of course, the people around, because they are so mediocre, sycophants and ass lickers, so he can never have a true picture on any front whatsoever. The only thing that he actually pays attention to, and we know by observing how he reacts, is the stock market, the oil market, and the bond market. That's apart from that, nothing else.
If he was a wise person, I would say he would just dismiss Pete Hegseth right away, right now, because Pete Hegseth is one of the biggest problem. The guy comes out just, it seems like he's playing a movie. It's something like that. He's not real. The guy is not real, in my opinion.
And childish, horribly misinformed, prejudiced, with the brains of a 4-year-old once again, etc. You can imagine this guy is making decisions for the whole gigantic Pentagon machine. No wonder these generals, most of these generals they are appalled, and there's nothing they can do about it.
Exactly.
No.
Pepe, I think how do you see the way that China and Russia see the reality of the Strait of Hormuz? Do you think China has some sort of difficulty with the Strait of Hormuz, or
Yes.
Russia, the way that Russia sees that? Go ahead, your understanding.
No, Russia, they're reaping the benefits because they're selling oil like crazy. So for them, this is a perfect arrangement, right? Yeah. China it's immensely complicated. For instance, I spend a lot of time reading some of the best Chinese analysts translated from Mandarin to English. No? And they are too cautious. Most of them. I am generalizing a little bit. But among the best ones, Fudan University, Renmin University, Tsinghua, etc., they still hold the U.S. in. They still deal with U.S. with some sort of awe. They are still under, all that glimmer and glitz of the superpower. And some of their analyses are conditioned by what they learn from American mainstream media. It's horrible. They're Chinese analysts, Once again, I'm not talking about all of them. I like the really radical ones, but there are not many. Because in China, as you know, the directive in terms of what can be published in China, they are very strict. And you have to strictly align with the Minister of Information, with the Minister of Foreign Relations, etc. So deviations, it's very, very hard. So in terms of independent critical thinking, is very, very hard. So when you find a Chinese analyst that breaks with the mold, it's a breath of fresh air, but there are not many, unfortunately, right? For instance, many of them, they still don't understand the proxy war in Ukraine in detail, and they should. It's their neighbor. And in Iran, of course, their main worry is China energy security. So most of the discussion is focused on China energy security. And of course, you won't get any information on how China is actually helping Iran in practical terms. It's very hard to get that. You have nuggets here and there, right? So, and now they are in an extremely complex position because as much as some elements of the semi-closed Strait of Hormuz help China in terms of the petro yuan, payment on SIPs, etc., not all the tankers going to China are passing through the Strait of Hormuz. So China is getting less energy via the Strait of Hormuz than before. And they have to compensate that. Of course, they have different sources. Gas, they can get more gas from Turkmenistan. They can get more gas from power of Siberia. They can get more gas from Myanmar. It's possible. Oil, they can get more oil from Kazakhstan, the pipelines that arrive in Xinjiang. But obviously, they were always counting on that free flow of energy via the Persian Gulf, not only from Iran, but from the other Persian Gulf players. So they are squeezed into a complicated position. And at the same time, they don't want to antagonize the US frontally. That's not the Chinese diplomatic playing goal kind of way. But at the same time, they're doing the best they can to profit from the situation because they see the empire enfeebled, going crazy, and this provoked by a mid-sized power, not even a superpower. It's not China or Iran, or Russia. It's Iran, mid-sized power. So they're trying to profit from it as best as they can. But it's a very complicated position. And this decision that they made to suggest to Iran, go to Islamabad and try to examine where this ceasefire comes from and where it could possibly lead. This is a very risky position because now China is directly implicated in this process. Directly. This was China telling Iran. It was not China telling Pakistan. That's a completely different story. Before, it was the Muslim countries, Pakistan, and they went to China. Remember the first time when the foreign minister, Dar, the foreign minister of Pakistan, went to Beijing to talk to Wang Yi, and they had that 5-point blend declaration about peace. Blah, blah, blah. That led to nowhere. But this time, the negotiation this past 2 or 3 days, the Chinese at the last minute, they suggested to Iran explicitly, go to Islamabad. So now they have skin in the game. And they have to assure, of course, you won't see that in Chinese media anywhere. But basically, they told Iran, look, we're going to be your guarantor in the back, whatever happens. And obviously, Tehran agreed. So there will come a time, if things start to derail, Tehran is going to pick up the phone to Beijing. I said, okay, where's your help now? So China now is in a very delicate position, which they were not only a few days ago. And I was trying to find nuggets about that on Guansha. I follow Guansha a lot. So they republished my articles. I met the director in Shanghai and all that. I couldn't read anywhere, even 1 or 2 paragraphs talking about this new Chinese position. So it's complicated, Nima, and all of you, our audience, to follow China as a foreigner. It's extremely complicated. So it depends on us cultivating our, establishing relationships of trust, which is something that I have been doing for years, in fact. But this takes time. You know, you have to meet them in person. It's not on email. No, you have to go there. Then you have a lunch together. Then you discuss off the record. So when they start trusting you, then you start getting privileged information. But this is a long process.
Because they're not that much vocal about what they're thinking.
They're not. No, but not at all. But this is the way the Chinese deal with extremely sensitive foreign policy issues. This applies to everything. And so in some cases, this is something that I heard. I cannot say. I heard from diplomatic sources. I cannot say where from. They told me, look, sometimes the Chinese bet on the wrong horses, and they don't know it. And when they discover it, it's too late. This has nothing to do with Iran. They know exactly who they're dealing with because there is a strategic relationship. There is this 400 billion along 25-year plan, energy infrastructure. It's different. And Iran is the key Chinese ally, I would say, in the western part of Eurasia. No question about that. That's different. But they refuse to be directly involved, and especially now, directly involved in a war, and it's not their war. Ultimately, it's an indirect war against them as well, because if Iran falls, no question, they lose their major ally in West Asia. This would be a mega blow for the Chinese, and they know it very well. So they have to protect their ally.
Yeah.
So the most challenging aspect is that it's very hard to know how far will they go. None of us know. You
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
But I'm sure the conversation at the highest levels between Tehran and Beijing, it's very good. It's very good.
Yeah.
This helps. No?
Yeah. I think before wrapping up, Pepe, I think it's just we have to see the alternative in the West Asia. This war has diminished the picture of GCC countries in the eyes of
Yes,
Russians and Chinese. That's a huge factor right now.
enormous. Wow, especially because we have one of them is a BRICS member. No? And in Egypt, which is close by, is also a BRICS member. And Saudi Arabia is on the fence. We don't know what Saudi Arabia is. Is Saudi Arabia in BRICS or not? They don't know because they are hedging so much. No? But we already see the split, Nima. And I'm sure all of you, our audience, are already split. Qatar and Oman, they already made very clear that they will align with Iran, whatever happens next. So that's so the GCC is already broken in half. Bahrain is broke, right? And the whole thing is collapsing. So Bahrain has no future. Bahrain is a non-player in the future of the GCC. Kuwait still hangs in the balance. They could be reabsorbed to Iraq in the near future. Everything is possible. So the once again the big problem is, okay, what about Saudi Arabia and the Emirates? And the Emirates is not the whole thing. No? We're talking basically, for instance, Sharjah, cool. Fujairah, cool. The problem is Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Dubai, the business model is dead. We already know that. And we don't know if they'll be able to reinvent themselves. Doing what? Nobody will want to live in Dubai anymore or do business in Dubai. Forget it. And Saudi Arabia. That's the key of the whole story. And MBS has some very serious decisions ahead. Everything that he promised to the Trump administration, all the deals are related to the IMEC corridor, which has collapsed, everything related to the Abraham Accords and all that. This whole thing is collapsing in front of them. So how they're going to, we don't know how they're going to play their next hand. And they don't have many cards in their hands.
No, exactly.
But it's already split. But GCC is already a mess, Nima. Right? It's already split.
No, exactly. Muito obrigado, Pepe.
Obrigado a você. I think we scratched the surface because it's getting more and more
complicated. Tudo que a gente pode fazer isso. Não, fora disso, o que vai fazer?
Scratch the surface.
It's too difficult right now to predict what would happen. I think there is a lot to be played right now on both sides, and that's
and for the global economy.
Yeah, for the global economy, exactly.
It's probably one of the few things that the baboon of Barbaria, I would say, intrinsically knows that if this war goes on, the global economy will be destroyed, and he will be responsible for it. You know, till the end of history.
Exactly.
So no wonder he wants an off ramp. It has to do, of course, with midterm elections, all that crap, internal crap, but of course, his legacy. Don't forget, we're dealing with the guy with an ego the size of the Milky Way. And for the moment, he's being ridiculed everywhere.
Obrigado, Pepe.
Obrigado, querido. Muito obrigado. Obrigado a vocês todos. Nossa audiência global.
Exatamente.
E não se esqueçam, a luta continua.
Continua, exatamente. Exatamente. Até
The
mais,
road
Pepe.
to sovereignty goes on forever.
Show, show.
Obrigado. Tchau, tchau.
Obrigado. Tchau, tchau.
Tchau.